He was a black CEO, the king of a corporate dynasty, desperately trying to bury a shameful secret from his company's past to secure its future. She was the white archivist, a forgotten employee in the building's basement, and the only person alive who knew the truth. When he offered her a fortune for her silence, she refused, demanding a price that would cost him more than money. It would cost him his soul. The silence in the archives of Vance Industries was older than the city itself. It was a silence made of paper, dust, and forgotten stories. Down here, in the climate-controlled basement, Evelyn Reed was not an employee. She was a guardian. At 27, she was the company's chief and only archivist, a title that sounded far grander than her reality of sorting through yellowed ledgers and brittle photographs in a room no one ever visited. Above her, on the 90th floor, Isaiah Vance, the company's formidable CEO, stared at a multi-billion-dollar merger agreement. The deal would solidify his family's legacy for another generation. But there was a problem, a ghost in the company's history that threatened to kill it all. His grandfather, the legendary founder, had built his empire on a foundation of genius, but there were whispers of a shadow partner, a brilliant inventor who had vanished from the records just as the company took off. The acquiring firm wanted a full historical audit. They wanted to know there were no skeletons. "Find the ghost," Isaiah had commanded his legal team, "and then bury it." They found the ghost in Evelyn's meticulous research. A file buried deep in the digital archives contained a signed partnership agreement, original patents, and letters. They all pointed to one undeniable truth. His grandfather had not been a lone genius. He had a partner, a man named Arthur Hemlock, who had been systematically erased from the company's history after his untimely death, his shares absorbed, his legacy stolen. And the only person who had access to all the original physical documents was the quiet girl in the basement. Isaiah descended into the archives himself. He found her at a large oak table, a single lamp casting a warm glow on a stack of Arthur Hemlock's personal journals. She wore a simple gray cardigan, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a loose, messy bun. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like a librarian. "Miss Reed," he said, his voice echoing in the stillness. Evelyn looked up, her blue eyes, usually calm and observant, showing a flicker of surprise. "Mr. Vance, I wasn't expecting you." "I'm aware of what you found," he said, getting straight to the point. His tone was cold, precise. "Those documents are a matter of internal security. They're to be sealed. No copies, no reports. Is that understood?" Evelyn carefully placed a bookmark in the journal and closed it. Her hands were steady. "With respect, sir, these aren't just documents. This is the history of the company. It's the story of a man whose legacy was stolen." Isaiah felt a flash of irritation. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially by someone from the basement. "This is a business, Miss Reed, not a museum. That history, as you call it, is a liability that could cost this company and its thousands of employees everything." He stepped closer, his imposing frame casting a shadow over her. He made his offer, the one that had never failed him before. "I am prepared to offer you a significant bonus for your discretion, a life-changing amount. You'll sign a non-disclosure agreement, and this file will cease to exist. Name your price." He expected her to be shocked, tempted, perhaps to negotiate. He did not expect her to smile. A sad, knowing smile that made him feel strangely small. "My price isn't something you can afford, Mr. Vance," she said softly. "Try me." "I want the truth," she said, her voice clear and unwavering in the silent room. "I want you to give Arthur Hemlock back his name." Isaiah stared at him, dumbfounded. The archivist in the gray cardigan wasn't asking for money. She was demanding justice.
And in that moment, he knew that the ghost he was trying to bury was not in the files. It was standing right in front of him.
Isaiah's world was built on leverage. He knew how to find a person's weakness, their ambition, their fear, their price, and use it. But Evelyn Reed seemed to have none. In the days following their confrontation, he tried every tactic. He had her formally reassigned, her access to the main archives revoked, her duties reduced to digitizing meaningless corporate memos from the 1990s. It was a quiet, bureaucratic punishment designed to break her spirit. She didn't break. She simply did the work. Her calm diligence, an act of silent defiance. He then had his HR department present her with a promotion, a new role as a records consultant on the 75th floor, with triple her salary and a corner office. The only condition was the signing of a company-wide NDA that would legally bury the Hemlock files forever. She declined. The one-line email to HR was polite but firm. "Thank you for the offer, but my work in the archives is not yet complete." Frustrated, Isaiah found himself drawn back to the basement. He told himself it was to assess the situation, but he knew it was something else. He was intrigued by this woman who operated on a code he didn't understand. He found her in a small, forgotten section of the archives, carefully restoring a damaged photograph. "You're being difficult, Miss Reed," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "I'm being consistent," she replied, not looking up at her work. "There's a difference." He leaned against a towering shelf of leather-bound ledgers. "What is it you want, really? You have the power to derail a multi-billion-dollar deal. You could demand a fortune. Why this crusade for a dead man?" She finally looked at him, her blue eyes holding a startling clarity. "Because history is not a liability, Mr. Vance. It's a debt. Your grandfather built this company on Arthur Hemlock's genius. That doesn't make his accomplishments any less remarkable, but it makes them shared. You can't build a future on a foundation of lies. Sooner or later, it cracks." He was silent for a moment, the truth of her words unsettling him. "This is not a lie I created." "No," she agreed, "but it's one you're choosing to maintain. That makes it yours." He began spending more time in the archives under the guise of reviewing sensitive materials. He watched her work, saw the reverence with which she handled the old documents. He read Arthur Hemlock's journals, not as a threat, but as the words of a man. He discovered a brilliant, hopeful mind, a man who had seen technology as a way to connect people, not just to generate profit. He saw photographs of his own grandfather, younger, smiling, standing beside Hemlock, the two of them a team. "They were friends," Evelyn said quietly one afternoon, noticing him staring at a photo. "Before the money, before the ambition." As they spoke, a quiet, fragile connection began to form. He saw in her an integrity he had never encountered in his world of boardrooms and backroom deals. She saw in him a man struggling under the weight of a legacy he never chose. He wasn't a villain. He was a prince who had inherited a haunted kingdom. "My father told me my grandfather never spoke of the early days," Isaiah admitted one evening. "He said it was a painful time. Now I understand he meant it was a shameful time. Or maybe just a sad one. It's possible to admire the man he became while still honoring the man he wronged." The pressure from the merger was mounting. The board was getting nervous. One of the most aggressive board members, Richard Croft, a man who had always been a rival to the Vance family, was starting to ask pointed questions. He sensed a weakness. "We need to finalize this, Isaiah. Whatever historical static you're dealing with, make it go away. The market doesn't reward hesitation." That night, Isaiah made Evelyn a final offer. It was different. "Help me understand," he said, sitting across from her at the great oak table in the archives. "Walk me through everything, every document, every letter. I need to know the full story before I make a decision." It was a truce. For the next week, they worked side by side, piecing together the hidden history of Vance Industries. And as the story of two friends and a dream destroyed by ambition unfolded, Isaiah felt his own ambition begin to change. He was no longer just protecting a company, he was recovering a soul.
The week Isaiah and Evelyn spent in the archives was like entering another time. The relentless pace of the corporate world above them faded, replaced by the quiet rustle of old paper and the low murmur of their voices. Together they traced the story of a friendship that had blossomed into a world-changing partnership, only to be consumed by greed. Evelyn showed him the early sketches, the excited late-night letters between his grandfather and Arthur Hemlock. They were going to change the world, she said, her voice filled with a reverence that was almost contagious. They believed technology could be a force for good, a tool to build communities. Isaiah saw it in the documents. His grandfather hadn't started as a ruthless tycoon. He had been a dreamer, just like Hemlock. But somewhere along the way, the dream had curdled. After Hemlock's sudden death from a heart condition, the language in his grandfather's journals changed. The passion was replaced by a cold, hard pragmatism. He had made a choice. He had chosen the empire over the partnership. He was afraid, Isaiah said, the realization dawning on him. Afraid the company would die with Hemlock, so he buried him to protect the dream. Or to own it, Evelyn countered gently. During this time, Richard Croft was not idle. He had sensed a secret and was determined to use it. He hired a private investigator to dig into the company's past, and specifically into the work of the quiet archivist in the basement. It didn't take long for him to find the thread. One evening, Richard cornered Isaiah in the executive garage. "I know what you're hiding," he said, his voice a low, triumphant hiss. "The ghost of Arthur Hemlock, a stolen legacy. Can you imagine what our merger partners would do with that information, or the press? The Vance name would be dragged through the mud." "What do you want, Richard?" Isaiah asked, his face a calm mask. "A controlling interest in the new entity," Richard said smoothly, "and you will announce that I am taking over as CEO. You will step down, citing personal reasons. In return, I will ensure this little historical inconvenience remains buried." "You're blackmailing me," Isaiah stated, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm offering you a clean exit," Richard countered with a smirk. "You have 48 hours to decide." Isaiah walked away, the threat hanging in the air. He now faced the same choice his grandfather had all those years ago: protect the company at any cost, or honor the truth and risk losing everything. He went straight to the archives. Evelyn was there, as he knew she would be. He told her everything. He expected her to be scared, to tell him to take the deal. Instead, her eyes shone with a fierce, unwavering light. "Don't you see?" she said, her voice filled with a sudden passion. "This is your chance. It's your chance to be the man your grandfather couldn't be, to choose truth over power. It will destroy the company," he said, the weight of 1,000 employees on his shoulders. "No," she insisted, her hand resting on a stack of Hemlock's journals. "It will liberate it. A legacy built on a lie is a prison. You have the key, Isaiah. You can finally set it free." He looked at her, at the absolute, unshakable belief in her face. She wasn't just an archivist. She was his conscience. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. His decision was made. He called an emergency all-hands meeting for the entire company. The announcement was cryptic: a message regarding the future and foundation of Vance Industries. He invited the board, the merger partners, and the press. He also made one other call. He found the address for Arthur Hemlock's only living relative, a granddaughter who was a struggling public school teacher, and sent a car for her. He was done burying ghosts. It was time for a resurrection.
The auditorium at Vance Industries headquarters was packed.
Anxious energy crackled in the air. The board members sat in the front row, their faces grim. The press smelled blood in the water. Richard Croft stood near the side of the stage, a smug, predatory smile on his face, convinced he was about to witness a public surrender. Backstage, Isaiah straightened his tie. His hands were steady. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of absolute clarity. Evelyn stood beside him, not as an employee, but as an equal. She gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "The truth is your shield," she whispered. He nodded, then walked onto the stage. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice calm and resonant. "I am here today to talk about our company's foundation. For decades, the story has been that Vance Industries was built by one man, my grandfather. That story, as I have recently learned, is incomplete." A murmur went through the crowd. Richard Croft's smile tightened. "The truth is, there was another man, a partner, a friend, a genius named Arthur Hemlock," Isaiah continued. He gestured to the large screen behind him, and a black-and-white photograph appeared. A young Isaiah Vance Sr. and a smiling, bright-eyed Arthur Hemlock, their arms around each other, blueprints spread before them. Arthur Hemlock was the heart of this company's innovation, and after his death, his legacy was erased, buried, stolen. This company's success was built on a lie of omission, and today, that lie ends. He looked directly at Richard Croft, whose face had gone pale. "There are those who would use this truth as a weapon, who would see it as a liability to be hidden. They believe a company's soul is a fair price to pay for its stock price. I am here to say that they are wrong." He then laid out his plan. Vance Industries would publicly restore Arthur Hemlock's name as co-founder. They had located his only heir, his granddaughter, and would be making full restitution, transferring a significant percentage of the company's equity to her family, as was their rightful inheritance. Finally, he announced the creation of the Hemlock Vance Foundation for Ethical Innovation, a multi-billion-dollar trust dedicated to funding tech startups that prioritize social good over profit. "Our future will not be built on erasing our past. It will be built on honoring it. This is the new foundation of our company." He then did something no one expected. None of this would be possible without the courage and integrity of one person, the woman who found the truth and who taught me its value, our company's chief archivist and the new head of the Hemlock Vance Foundation, Ms. Evelyn Reed. He turned and held out his hand. Evelyn walked onto the stage to a stunned silence, followed by a wave of thunderous applause. She stood beside him, not as a forgotten clerk, but as the moral architect of the company's future. Richard Croft watched, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. His weapon had been turned into a crown. He had lost. In the front row, a woman with kind, intelligent eyes, Arthur Hemlock's granddaughter, was openly weeping, not in sorrow, but in gratitude. The ghost of her grandfather had finally been brought into the light. The merger didn't die. In fact, the acquiring firm was so impressed by Isaiah's integrity that they renegotiated the deal, making it a true partnership of equals. Vance Industries stock, after a brief dip, soared to an all-time high. Honesty, it turned out, was very good for business. After the applause died down and the crowd began to disperse, Isaiah and Evelyn stood alone on the stage. The room was empty, but it felt full of a new, clean energy. "You did it," she said softly, her eyes shining with pride. "No," he corrected, his gaze holding hers. "We did it." He reached out, not as a CEO,
but as a man, and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. "I believe I owe you a fortune for your silence, Ms. Reed." She smiled, a real, radiant smile. "And I believe you've already paid it."
The months that followed the announcement were a whirlwind of change, not just for the company, but for Isaiah and Evelyn. The archives were moved from the basement to a sunlit suite on the 70th floor, right next to the new foundation's headquarters. It was a symbolic move, bringing the company's history from the shadows into the light. Evelyn thrived in her new role. She was a natural leader, guiding the foundation with the same meticulous care and quiet passion she had once reserved for her dusty files. She oversaw the transfer of equity to Arthur Hemlock's granddaughter, Sarah, and the two women formed a close bond, united by their shared mission to honor his legacy. Isaiah, for his part, felt like he was breathing for the first time. The crushing weight of his family's secret was gone, replaced with a sense of purpose that was deeper than any quarterly report. He and Evelyn became an inseparable team, their professional partnership slowly, inevitably, blossoming into something more. Their moments together were quiet, stolen between meetings and foundation work. A shared coffee in the new archives, a late-night walk through the city as they discussed a new grant proposal, a silent shared understanding over a boardroom table. He fell in love not with a grand gesture, but with 1,000 small moments. The way she would bite her lip when deep in thought, her fierce intelligence, her unwavering moral compass. One evening, he found her in the archives, looking at the old photograph of his grandfather and Arthur Hemlock, now displayed in a place of honor. "Do you think he would be proud?" Isaiah asked, standing beside her. "I think he would be relieved," she said. "You didn't just save his company, you saved his name." He turned to her, his heart full. "You saved my name, Evelyn." "I just held up a mirror," she whispered. "You were the one who was brave enough to look." He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. It felt natural, right. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how my price wasn't something I could afford. I think I understand now." "And what's that?" "That some things, the most important things, aren't for sale. They have to be earned." He leaned in, and in the quiet of the archives, surrounded by the ghosts of the past and the promise of the future, he kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of profound recognition, a meeting of two souls who had found their home in the truth. Their relationship was not a secret, but it was private. It was a quiet, steady thing that grew stronger with each passing day. They were a team in every sense of the word, balancing each other perfectly. He had the power and the platform. She had the vision and the soul. Together, they were transforming Vance Industries from a corporate giant into a force for good. Richard Croft was voted off the board, his brand of ruthless, soulless capitalism no longer welcome in the new Vance Industries. He faded into obscurity, a relic of a bygone era. 1 year after the meeting that changed everything, Isaiah took Evelyn to a small, undeveloped plot of land on the outskirts of the city. "What is this place?" she asked, looking around at the rolling green hills. "This," he said, pulling a set of blueprints from a tube, "is the future. It's the new campus for the Hemlock Vance Foundation. And this," he pointed to a central, light-filled building on the plans, "is the Arthur Hemlock Library of Innovation, a place for his journals, his patents, and his story to be shared with the world." She looked at the plans, then at him, her eyes filling with tears. "It's perfect." "There's just one thing missing," he said, his voice dropping. He got down on one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. "A co-founder. Evelyn Reed, will you build this and everything else with me for the rest of our lives?" She laughed through her tears, throwing her arms around him. "Yes," she whispered. "Always yes."
Their wedding was a quiet affair, held in the half-finished library, with only their closest friends and family in attendance. Sarah Hemlock was Evelyn's maid of honor. It was a ceremony not about merging fortunes, but about merging souls. Years later, Vance Hemlock Industries, as it was now called, was a global leader not just in technology, but in corporate ethics. The foundation had changed thousands of lives, funding projects that used technology to solve real-world problems. Isaiah and Evelyn, now married with 2 children of their own, were often seen walking through the halls of the Hemlock Library, telling their own children the story of the 2 friends who had started it all. They taught them that a legacy is not about the buildings you erect or the money you accumulate. It's about the truths you honor and the good you leave behind. One afternoon, their young son pointed to the famous photograph of Isaiah Sr. and Arthur Hemlock. "Were they best friends, like you and Mommy?" he asked. Isaiah looked at Evelyn, his eyes full of a love that had been tested by secrets and forged in truth. "Yes," he said, pulling his son close, "they were. And they reminded us that the most important partnerships are built not on what you can gain, but on what you refuse to lose." They had not just rewritten the company's history, they had created a new one, a legacy of integrity, love, and the radical idea that the truth, no matter how costly, is always the best investment. Their story became a quiet legend in the corporate world, a reminder that even in the highest towers of power, the most important work is often done in the silent, forgotten basements where the truth is kept, waiting for someone brave enough to bring it into the light.
If this story reminded you that true integrity is priceless and that honoring the past is the only way to build a meaningful future, we invite you to be part of our community. We share stories about quiet courage, the power of truth, and the unlikely heroes who remind us what truly matters. If it meant something to you, share it with someone who believes that a good name is worth more than a fortune. Leave a comment. What does a true legacy mean to you? Subscribe for more tales where the ghosts of the past are finally honored and the future is built on truth. No pressure, just real stories that prove the most valuable asset is a clear conscience.